Tonight on Primetime Politics, Conservative Promise.
We can choose change. We can choose hope. We can choose our future.
Pierre Poilievre unveils what a Conservative government would look like. A promise to cut taxes and smaller government, but is it enough to close the polling gap with the Liberals? Coming up, we'll speak with the Angus Reid Institute's Shachi Kurl to get her thoughts. Also, our campaign strategists join us to talk about the latest political ads and what they say about where the parties are at 6 days before Election Day. Plus, BC radio host Jas Johal on the tight races in British Columbia. Could they help build or block a Liberal win? This is Primetime Politics. Hello, I'm Michael Serapio. Well, Pierre Poilievre rolled out his vision of a Conservative government today, the platform bringing all the promises the party has made through the course of this campaign together and adding to them a promise to shrink government, cut taxes, and pass a new law that would ban any new federal tax or tax increase unless passed by Canadians in a national referendum.
After a lost Liberal decade of red tape, block projects and rising taxes that drove almost $500 billion of investment south, we will get Canada building again with a new Conservative economic action plan to unleash our vast resource wealth, build major new infrastructure, bring back investment, and turn Canada into the richest country in the world. To that we know. Thank you.
But will the Conservative plan help the party in the polls? Both the Liberals and the NDP platforms were released on Saturday, and according to Elections Canada, more than 7 million Canadians have already voted in advance polls. Well, Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. She is here to talk about her latest numbers. Shachi, always good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Nice to be with you this evening.
So listen, let's begin with your top line numbers, the latest ones, because the Liberals, according to your institute, are still very much in the lead at 44%, Conservatives at 39%, the NDP a distant third. Does today's platform have the power to help Conservatives close that gap in any way?
Big deep breath as I think about this, because one doesn't want to be too dismissive, but the fact that we are seeing this platform released with mere days left in the campaign after 7.5 million voters have already cast advance ballots, and additionally, it's not just the Conservatives, it's the NDP as well as the Liberals who really waited until the very last possible moments to release these platforms. Says to me that their own campaigns did not put a tremendous amount of stock in convincing Canadians on the merits of these written promises that they say are costed. And of course, there's always, from a political standpoint, a risk. And the earlier you put it out there, the more critics will pick a costed platform apart. But to wait until the Tuesday before a following Monday election, when we know that turnout has been as high as it does, it's almost a tacit admission on part of the campaigns themselves, whether it's a Saturday or a Tuesday. In the last week of the campaign to do this, how many people are they expecting to sway on policy and costed platforms? I would suggest very few. Yeah,
that's certainly a question people are asking. But you know, what is interesting to me, though, when I look at your latest numbers, less the Conservative platform, but in particular, the latest numbers coming from the Angus Reid Institute, one result that really stood out for me was leader momentum, because I would think if one is a Conservative after weeks of trailing in the polls, this has to be some good news for those who support Pierre Poilievre.
It would definitely represent a boost, a morale booster, and a practical booster, just in terms of seeing now the level at which I think in the last 7 days many Canadians have appraised Poilievre and perhaps are seeing him in a slightly different light. He was praised for his English Leaders Debate performance. He was certainly seen in the last couple of weeks to have slightly more authentic moments on the campaign trail, maybe not necessarily authentic moments with members of the parliamentary press gallery or the mainstream media, but in some of the clips we've seen, some of the interactions he's had both with would-be voters and constituents and with his own children. But that that said, the bad news to this good news for the Conservatives is it has not really moved the dial in terms of vote intent. We'd already seen the Conservatives narrowing the gap with the Liberals, sitting at 39%, which in any other election, which is what makes this election so unique, Michael, that would have been, you know, basically potentially majority territory for the Conservatives. It's the fact that the Liberals are sitting in the mid-40s, plus or minus a couple points, depending on margin of error, in so many pollsters' results, which really has changed the dynamic of this campaign.
Well, and it also is bearing out in the numbers that I saw that Angus Reid did regarding urban centers. We talked about that just a week ago. Let's pull up the latest board numbers here, because, you know, when you talk about seat-rich GTA, seat-rich Metro Vancouver and Montreal, well, the numbers are there. Talk to us about the trend lines that you're seeing in terms of the race in the urban centers of this country, the largest ones at least.
Well, the trend lines in terms of the progress of this campaign showed, you know, the Liberals shooting up to the loss and the detriment of the NDP in places like Metro Vancouver, in places like the GTA and downtown Toronto and the 416, and to the detriment of the Bloc in parts of Quebec, although perhaps not Montreal. The broader point being this: we saw the consolidation of the left of center vote before the writs were even issued, in the weeks leading up to that. And so as much of I don't want to call it a non-story, but we haven't seen a tremendous amount of movement over the course of the campaign in those urban ridings. You see there in each of those areas a pretty significant lead for the Liberals, largely formed to the detriment of the NDP, with the Conservatives more or less staying where they have been. So they haven't necessarily lost support, but they haven't been able to match really the consolidation of the left of center vote, which is where we see ourselves now in the cities. A place at situations where the Conservatives at the end of last year, at the beginning of this year, were in really advantageous situations, even in the cities. We're poised to maybe make some breakthroughs in urban centers where they've traditionally really struggled, and all of a sudden finding themselves battling the NDP for second place in some of those areas.
Well, less than a week to go before Election Day, and of course we're going to keep watching to see if any great movement happens. But Shachi, for what you have shared this evening, thank you for that. Always enjoy the time. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
And that's Shachi Kurl. Well, as the campaigns ramp up their efforts in those electoral battlegrounds on the airwaves and online, the parties have also launched new ads in recent days, including this one from the Conservative campaign that went out late last week.
How's your son, David?
Well, it's been a tough few years for him. He just can't seem to get ahead.
Yeah, we had to pay for Sarah's down payment last year. Things are tough for her, too.
You know what Mark Carney says.
Come on, do you really think that a fourth Liberal term is going to change anything?
You know, I've been thinking the same thing.
Are we really going to give these clowns a fourth term? I'm voting Conservative. There you go.
Yeah, for a change.
Well, let's talk about the campaign strategies as we approach the final days. Cheryl Oates is principal at GT and most recently campaign director for the Saskatchewan NDP. Michele Cadario is the CEO of Vanguard Strategy and a former national campaign director for the Liberals. Jordan Paquet, vice president of Blue Sky Strategy Group, was deputy campaign manager for the PEI-PC party in the last provincial campaign. Hello to all three of you.
Hello.
Hi.
So hello. So no surprise, we're going to start with you, Jordan, because that was a Conservative ad. Yeah. And clearly it did not feature the Conservative leader, and throughout this campaign we've seen the party essentially poll better than has Pierre Poilievre. Is this ad an admission that Pierre Poilievre has essentially hit his ceiling in terms of attracting new voters to join the Conservative cause?
I don't think it's so much that. I mean, he's been featured prominently in ads throughout the campaign, him doing his own voiceovers, lots of online digital ads, some that are still out there as well. I think this type of an ad is something that shows two Canadians sort of in their own setting, you know, in this case, two older gentlemen at the driving range. Having Pierre walk right up into the middle of that might be a little bit awkward as far as one of those conversations go. So no, I wouldn't read too much into that at all. I think this is just the Conservatives trying to zero in on what they believe one of the ballot questions is, and that's who can best deliver change after the last 10 years. And I think they'll supplement that with other commentary by the leader over the next bit too.
Yeah, Michelle, what do you make of the absence of Pierre Poilievre in that ad?
Well, it was a choice, and it was a choice for a reason. You don't pull your leader out of an ad if they are polling way ahead of your party, as is the case with Mark Carney to the Liberals. And clearly, it's a certain demographic that they're going after with that ad. There's, you got two white men who are a little more elderly and clearly doing well. And not typically the cohort that the Conservatives have to chase during an election campaign. So I also find that really interesting. It certainly got a lot of views, and so I give credit to them for that. It is clearly a strategic ad that's done, and only because you see the numbers that support that kind of a thing.
Okay, and Cheryl, what do you say? Like, when you look at the strategy of that, what does it say to you about where the Conservatives are right now in terms of trying to close the gap with the Liberals, who are leading in the polls?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I think the fact that Pierre Poilievre is not in the ad in the closing week, when we should be, past the persuasion phase and just reminding people to go out and vote, is very telling. And I think if you look at the polling, it's really clear to see Pierre Poilievre's negative sentiment numbers have been trending up, especially compared to Mark Carney's throughout the campaign. He, like others have said, is polling lower than his party, and he's not an asset in terms of advertising right now. The second kind of wild thing to me is if the Conservatives do not have white, older, upper middle class golfers already voting for them, like, who do they have? It's wild to me that this is the group that they're currently trying to persuade or get out the vote with. But I mean, watching this, I've always admired the Conservatives' digital machine. They have an incredible digital machine that has curated online communities of millions and millions of you for everything they do. But the content of their advertising is just not as impressive. And you can see that in this ad, but it is not the only cringeworthy ad this campaign.
Okay, well, listen, we don't have time for all the ads, but I do want to play right now a Liberal ad for all of you, because unlike the Conservative ad, it does feature very prominently the Liberal leader. Let's take a look at what's been out in recent days from the Carney campaign. Okay, so Jordan, again, obviously the Liberals are basically saying that Pierre Poilievre's accomplishments pale in comparison to the accomplishments made by Mr. Carney. How do Conservatives counter that?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, one person you didn't see in the ad, of course, is Justin Trudeau. I mean, that's, it's obviously that's more the Conservatives would put in.
But that's not the campaign right now.
No, 100%. Yeah, no, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, they're trying to put off Mark Carney as kind of this boring economist. I mean, the ad is just pretty plain, relatively low budget. I think pretty easy to produce something like that. And yeah, I think that just goes what the Liberals are obviously wanting to put out there right now, is saying, like, we're the guy that has been, been out there in the world economy before. Pierre Poilievre's just been a career politician. So I think the Conservatives are contrasting that by showing some of the experience and really tying Mark Carney back to that decade of Liberals over the last decade, and Justin Trudeau, and that's what we've seen as part of their ads. I mean, similar to the golf ads, similar to some of the other ones that they're putting out. That's what they really want to make this about, is still about a change election and showing that Mark Carney doesn't actually represent that change.
Mm-hmm. What do you say to what Jordan's saying? Because I do have a follow-up, but first and foremost, to your response to what Jordan's saying, Michelle.
Well, I guess I'm not surprised. That's what, you've got to spin it some way. It is clearly about leadership. It's clearly going down to the ballot question of who is best to take on Trump. And so putting that kind of experience, and yes, it's boring economic experience on a global scale, compared to somebody who's been in politics and has never had a job outside of politics. And so, that's what they want to contrast. It's a very strong contrast. It certainly has been something that seems to be working with Canadians. And so I think that when you have that kind of a pedal that you can press, you keep putting that pedal on the gas.
Although, you know, when you look at the Conservative campaign, through just about every event the party has had, they've had an announcement and a policy platform where Mark Carney keeps repeating the same lines of one government, not 13. We can do more for ourselves than they can do to us. You know, does that create a problem for the Liberals in the final days of trying to keep momentum up when the Conservatives have now come out with the campaign and it's backing up, has been announcement after announcement after announcement?
Well, I think you've had all the parties come out with announcements. I think that Mr. Carney's have been very much focused in on how do we prepare ourselves and position ourselves vis-a-vis the United States? How do we keep our sovereignty? How do we get our economy to be stronger? You know, I realize that after the debates, plastic straws seem to be the top of the list for the Conservatives. Big, strong day. I'm not sure that that's the ballot question for Canadians, or that was top of mind when Canadians were coming out of the election campaign. But fair ball if that's the route that they want to go down. At this point, you know, all of the platforms are out. You know, I think that there's a lot of wishful numbers, perhaps in the Conservative one. But Canadians have what they have to be able to decide. And so you see ads now that are just trying to reinforce each party's narrative and, you know, juxtapose that to their opponents.
Okay, well, party narrative, and you know, Charlie, I want to get your thoughts on what we're seeing from the NDP in the final days, really honing in on that debate performance that Mr. Singh has had, mainly online campaigns, it seems. Take a look at what we're seeing from the NDP.
But the problem is, who have you served? You've served to benefit those at the very top. You jacked up the price of homes for people living in affordable homes as a strategic decision. You dodged taxes. And then your decisions as Prime Minister show you're not prioritizing people, but you're prioritizing big business, billionaires.
Is that message having any impact? You know, because when the pollsters asked Canadians which leader they thought performed well, you know, Jagmeet Singh is still at the bottom of that list. Does that type of ad campaign actually have impact for the party?
I think it does. I think watching the debate, there's a lot of people who have said, oh my gosh, the NDP were just so annoying to listen to. Jagmeet Singh just wouldn't stop talking and just kept needling. Completely agree that when it comes to debate performance, that is the case. It was, you know, having anyone just sort of chirp is tough to listen to. But when you think about what the NDP is trying to be in Parliament, like that's what people who are voting for the NDP, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for, you know, whoever's in power, this, you know, at this point, obviously it looks like the Liberals, whoever's in power, that we're going to have somebody holding accountability in Parliament, reminding them over and over and over again, no matter what they're on that day. What about healthcare? What about pharmacare? What about dental care? And what you saw in the debate was, you know, an execution of a strategy for Jagmeet Singh to demonstrate what he would be in Parliament for Canadians and people in incumbent ridings, which is where the NDP are focused across Canada. That's what will motivate them to re-elect New Democrats, to say, you know, we believe at this point that Mark Carney is on his way to forming government, but what we need is to be able to hold their feet to the fire and have the things that we care about most as New Democrats not be forgotten in Parliament. That's what we saw through the last term. And, you know, annoying or not to listen to, that's what Jagmeet demonstrated through the debate as well.
Okay, listen, I only have about a minute and a half left, so 30 seconds for each of you. Last few days of this campaign, what are you watching out for with your particular party? What strategy do you think we're going to see, Jordan?
I think it's going to be really focused on where the leaders are traveling to. I mean, this is going to be just a very ground game, grind it out, get out the vote. Conservatives have a very organized ground game right now, a massive machine that they built up. I think you'll see a lot of GTA over the next couple of days. I think you'll see another Vancouver trip out there, another Eastern swing. I think they'll do a bit of a crisscross, but specifically where in some of these areas as well that they go to and really zero in on. This is going to come down. It's still a very close election. It's going to be seat by seat.
Okay, Michelle, where are we going to see the Liberals? What are we going to see for the Liberals?
I agree largely with what Jordan said. You're going to see the Liberals likely in Quebec, GTA, and British Columbia in the Lower Mainland. It's a very close race. There's a lot of odd ridings that can kind of have weird splits, given, you know, just different circumstances. And so it is going to be telling to see where folks are going. Are you going into pickup seats or are you going into save the furniture seats? And then it's all behind the scenes ground game. And we're in a sprint now.
Okay, final word to you, Cheryl. What are you going to be watching out for the NDP in the last few days?
Yeah, the NDP's GOTV campaign in these final days is much more strategic and targeted than the two major parties. We're going to see the NDP really move to get out the vote in the places where they currently hold seats as they work to maintain their party status. So that means on Vancouver Island, that means in the Lower Mainland, that means in southwestern Ontario and in Manitoba, looking to get over that 12 seat threshold and really looking to outperform what we've seen in poll aggregators.
Okay, well, listen, thank you for this. We will speak next week after the election, I'm sure. But for now, Jordan, Michele, and Cheryl, thank you for the time.
Thanks.
Well, as we approach the final days of this 45th general election campaign, British Columbia is proving to be the real battleground for the political parties. According to the polls, Liberals are dominating in Atlantic Canada, Quebec, and Ontario, Conservatives dominating in Saskatchewan and Alberta, but in BC it is a toss-up. And to tell us about where things stand right now, we're joined by Jas Johal, former journalist turned provincial cabinet minister, now hosts the Jas Johal Show on CKNW. Jas, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
So, before Justin Trudeau resigned, Conservatives were essentially projected to dominate all of British Columbia. Then comes Mark Carney on the scene. Why do you think Conservatives have not been able to get that commanding lead back in the course of this campaign?
Well, I think it comes down to the dueling ballot question, one of being, of course, Trump and tariffs, the other one being is it time for a change. Certainly here in British Columbia, there's very much a pronounced rural-urban divide. 3 million of us live here in Metro Vancouver. That's 55% of the province's population. You add in southern Vancouver Island, like communities like Victoria, that comes up to 60% of us live in this one little corner of the province. And this is where elections are won or lost, particularly in the suburbs of Metro Vancouver. And that has been the challenge for the Conservatives, is that message getting across in urban British Columbia, in suburban British Columbia, where the conversation is in and around Trump and tariffs. And that has been a challenge for Mr. Poilievre. There is no doubt the Conservatives will do well in the interior and the north, and in fact will take seats from the NDP in northern Vancouver Island, once again reminding us of the 1990s where the Reform took seats from the NDP. So you're going to see some of that. I can see the Conservatives taking some votes away from the NDP. I think they have a chance to win certain seats here in the suburbs like Richmond, but potentially a couple seats there. But it is a dogfight in big major urban centers like Surrey and further as you go to the valley. That is where the ground is, where they have to make up room, and it's going to be a tough challenge right now. People are concerned about the economy. They're concerned about Trump. We have a massive forest industry here. And with tariffs potentially coming, people are focused on that. Yes, there are people who say, look, time for a change, but the broader issue of Trump looms large here.
Okay, looms large, although I think it's fair to point out this has boiled down to a two-party race, even in British Columbia. And so we're looking at a number of potential casualties, one of whom could be the NDP leader. Talk to us about Jagmeet Singh and what he faces on the ground in his riding.
Well, the challenge there, it's an urban riding that he represents here in the suburbs, but the challenge is the same. What you're seeing is that NDP vote coalesce around the Liberals. The NDP, if they're sitting at 7, 8, 9% in the polls, they're not going to do well. If they hit 17, 18, 19%, that's when Conservatives have a chance to form government or even a minority government. But where the vote is today is one of the defining moments of this election so far, as the NDP voter has decided that Mr. Poilievre concerns them dramatically. They believe him as similar to a Donald Trump, and his policies are maybe a mini Trump, who knows? But at the end of the day, it has scared that NDP voter enough that they're looking at the Liberals. And that is really the tale of British Columbia at this particular point. That, and number two, that women overwhelmingly are supporting the Liberals. But for the case of the NDP and Mr. Singh and his specific riding, it is the collapse of the NDP vote. It's not just there. There's going to be a couple of other MPs, long-standing MPs that are well-liked in their ridings, Peter Julian, Don Davies. They too have a very difficult fight ahead of them. I'm not saying they can't win, but very, very difficult for them at this particular point. It is a challenge. It's a tough fight. And it just comes down to that NDP voter moving over to the Liberals because they're concerned about Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives winning. And so far, Mr. Singh has not been able to craft a message that is bringing that vote home.
And what about Elizabeth May? You mentioned the NDP, but here you have the Green Party co-leader running once again in Saanich Gulf Islands. How are things looking for her?
Well, that's an interesting riding. That's a four-way race between the Greens, the NDP, the Conservatives, and the Liberals. That's a toss-up. That's a real difficult one to predict. But once again, it speaks to the voter and where they are. I mean, I think that broad existential challenge that Mr. Trump and the American administration is forcing upon our broader conversation here in Canada is impacting ridings like that. So I couldn't predict right now who's going to win in that riding. It is a four-way race. But once again, that Green voter may be looking at the Liberals. They may actually be looking at the Conservatives. I don't know, because it's a very interesting Green vote. But at this particular point, the broader question of what is the ballot question, I think, is driving so many of these ridings that traditionally may have gone Green, would have remained NDP. And in the case of Victoria, which generally are NDP, are now potentially going Liberal, to the point where our Premier, who's an NDP Premier, has said he supports the incumbents, but he is obviously generally believed to support the federal Liberals in regards to choosing between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. So if it's an incumbent, certainly Mr. Eby will throw his support behind them. But if it's not, he's not too worried about that. He's more worried about whether Pierre Poilievre becomes Prime Minister. So lots of factors at the end of the day. There is that rural-urban split, and then, of course, there's that riding-to-riding debate that is occurring, and it'll impact each riding very differently here. So on election night, certainly, I know Southern Ontario plays a big role, but British Columbia certainly is going to be the place to watch as well, because that is the place which may lead to the Liberals actually winning a majority government.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I only have a minute left here, Jas, but I need to ask about your former cabinet colleague, Mike de Jong. He's running as an independent. He was not accepted by the Conservative Party to be a candidate for them. How are things looking in his race in Abbotsford, South Langley?
That's a tough one to predict. I mean, you would think the Conservative machinery would put the Conservatives over the top. But Mr. de Jong has been a 30-year veteran, long-time cabinet minister here in British Columbia, well-known name, and received the endorsement of a well-known mayor here in Abbotsford, and a cabinet minister, a Conservative MP, Ed Fast, and his entire constituency association has been supportive of Mr. de Jong as well. So that riding, another one, it's a toss-up. One would assume the Conservatives would win that, but with Mr. de Jong's name, the profile that he has, and the fact that this story has gained so much attention, that's another riding to watch. It's going to be a close one.
Jas Johal, always appreciate the time. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
And that is Primetime Politics for this Tuesday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow evening. Until then, take care.